Imagine you're at a party. Everyone's having a great time. Then suddenly, the guy who's been quietly drinking in the corner for 30 years stands up, pulls out a financial bazooka, and fires it directly at the punch bowl. That guy? That's Japan. And the punch bowl? That's the entire global economy. Right now, something absolutely wild is happening in the bond market. Japanese 30-year bond yields just hit levels we haven't seen since 1999, back when we all thought Y2K would end civilization and Britney Spears was topping the charts. But here's the real kicker. Japanese yields are now racing to catch up with U.S. yields, and when those two lines cross, many economists believe that's the precise moment the $300 trillion global debt bubble finally goes pop. You think I'm exaggerating? Stick around, because what's unfolding in Japan right now could make 2008 look like a practice round. Let me just paint you a picture. Japan has a $10 trillion debt problem. To put that in perspective, if Japan's debt were dollar bills stacked on top of each other, that stack would reach the moon and back 13 times. But here's where it gets really spicy. Japan isn't alone. China, the UK, France, and especially the United States, with its eye-watering $36 trillion debt mountain, they're all playing the same dangerous game, and they're all connected like a financial Jenga tower. Japan owns over $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, making them America's biggest foreign creditor. So when Japan sneezes, the U.S. doesn't just catch a cold. It catches pneumonia, bronchitis, and probably the flu all at once. So what exactly is happening? Well, imagine you have a friend. Let's call him Kenji. For 20 years, Kenji has been living the dream, borrowing money at basically 0% interest to fund his entire lifestyle. No consequences, just vibes. Kenji's debt is now twice his annual income. He's spending a full 25% of his paycheck just to make the minimum payments. But because interest rates were effectively zero, he just kept thinking, I'll deal with it later. Well, later just showed up, and it brought friends. Investors are finally waking up and realizing, wait a second, Kenji's broke, like really broke. So they are dumping Japanese bonds faster than people abandon Google+. And the yen? It's collapsing like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Bond yields are spiking. The currency is tanking. This is textbook sovereign debt crisis material, the kind of stuff that makes economists wake up in a cold sweat. But why is this happening now? That is the critical question. And the answer is hiding in plain sight: inflation. For decades, Japan had basically zero inflation, sometimes even deflation, meaning prices were actually going down. In Japan, you could buy a coffee for the same price in 2020 as you could in the year 2000. It's wild to even think about. The entire Japanese economic system was built on this foundation of zero inflation. It was like building a house on what you thought was solid ground, only to discover it's actually quicksand. But now, the numbers tell a different story. Japanese inflation has been averaging 3% for the last 3 years. That might not sound like much, but for Japan, that's like going from a gentle breeze to a Category 5 hurricane. And here's where it gets truly interesting. During those decades of zero inflation, Japan pulled off something called quantitative easing, which is just a fancy academic way of saying the money printer went brrr. They could get away with it because there was no inflation to punish them. But now, that inflation is here. The hurricane has made landfall. The game has changed, the bill has come due, and the quiet man in the corner is holding the detonator. Let's talk about the money printer. Imagine the Japanese government throwing a massive party. That's government spending. To pay for it, they sell IOUs, or bonds. Normally, people have to buy those IOUs. But what if nobody wants to buy them? Japan's central bank had a wild idea. What if we buy our own IOUs with money we just printed? It's like writing yourself a check, cashing it, and then going on a shopping spree. Sounds insane, but with zero inflation, you can get away with it. For 20 years, the Bank of Japan was the single biggest buyer of its own government's debt, hoovering up bonds like a vacuum cleaner at a confetti factory. Their balance sheet exploded. But here's the catch. Once inflation shows up, you have to turn off the money printer. Otherwise, inflation spirals, and a loaf of bread costs $50. So in 2022, Japan finally had to stop. And recently, they've started doing the unthinkable, selling those bonds back. Imagine an auction. For 20 years, one guy buys everything, no matter the price. Then one day, he stops showing up. Even worse, he starts selling his entire collection back to the market. What happens to prices? They crater. That is exactly what's happening to Japanese bonds. Yields are soaring. The market just woke up and realized our biggest buyer just became our biggest seller. And when bond yields spike in a country with debt that's 240% of its economy, that's when things get existential. Japan might not be able to afford its own debt payments. Now you're thinking, okay, how does this affect me? Here's the plot twist. Many predicted that with rising Japanese rates, investors there would dump U.S. Treasury bonds and bring that money home. It makes sense, right? Why hold a U.S. bond when you can get a similar return at home? But that's not what's happening. Japan's debt is 240% of its economy. America's debt is 120%. That's still terrible, but compared to Japan, the U.S. is the healthy patient in the cardiac ward. If Japanese rates rise too much, their government can't pay its bills without defaulting or firing up the money printer again, causing hyperinflation. The U.S. isn't there yet. We're in bad shape, but not print money or default bad. Here's the real impact. In Japan, interest rates adjusted for inflation are negative. If you hold yen, you are losing purchasing power every single day. Meanwhile, U.S. real rates are positive. It's like choosing between two sinking boats. One has a few holes. The other is half underwater. You'd probably choose the first boat. Or, even better, you stay on land. And in the financial world, land is gold, which explains why gold is absolutely crushing it. And the kicker? The US dollar has actually been strengthening against the yen. Japan's crisis makes the dollar look good by comparison. It's the least bad option at a terrible restaurant. You're still getting food poisoning, but the guy next to you is getting it way worse. So what's the bottom line? Japan's debt crisis isn't going to destroy the US economy overnight, but it is creating massive ripples. The real spillover is a stronger dollar in the short term, which helps the US but hurts emerging markets. But make no mistake, this is a warning shot. Japan is showing the world what happens when decades of money printing and zero interest rates finally catch up with you. The question isn't if this will happen to other countries. The question is when. Japan just pulled the trigger, and the bullet is still traveling.
Drop a comment, smash that like button, and let's build your freedom. Subscribe for more real money talk. Remember, I'm not a financial advisor. This is education, not advice.